Welcome to Thinking Tackle. I'm Simon Scott, and for this episode we've come to the southwest of England. We're in the beautiful county of Devon, and we're on the Digger Lakes complex, and we're going to have a crack at Snails Lake. Now this lake is a 5-acre maze of intricate features. It's got islands, huge great overhanging trees, lovely bays, there are reedy margins, patches of lilies. It is a close range paradise. What I'd like to do for this programme is show you the tactics and tackle that I would use to approach a venue like this. Round the corner is my great fishing friend Ben Gratwicke. He's also the fishery manager. Let's see how he's getting on. Hoi hoi.
Hello Mr. Scott, how you doing?
I'm good, how's it going?
Slow, yeah. It's very hot and yeah, on the carp front, very slow, yeah.
We got here last night, conditions looked great, there was fish all over the place. Today's completely contrasting to that. It's boiling hot, it's about 11 o'clock in the morning now, it's absolutely roasting hot, 25 degrees centigrade. Tricky conditions to catch carp in. But anyway, for the viewers' benefit that I've not seen you before, Ben, you know, we've known each other a long time. We've fished in places together. Where have we been?
Yeah, we've been all over the place, but I suppose the two most prominent ones were Burfield and Wraysbury. Yeah. So good big waters, 100+ acres. Yeah.
I mean, Wraysbury's 120 acres. It's only got about 45, 50 fish in it. It's a huge inland sea. This is very contrasting to that. It's much smaller. What sort of stock of fish have we got in here?
I've got approximately 160 now. Yeah, a good spread right through from sort of upper doubles right up through to mid-30s, about 60-20s.
So 60-20s is a good load of target fish, aren't there? And some 30-pounders thrown in there as well, so you've got a good chance. See one moving over there then, so they're about. And when we got here last night, Ben, as I mentioned, it looked really good for it. There was fish all over the swims we picked. How did you approach it? Would you go leading about in that situation, putting a lot of bait in?
Well, as you said, the fish were right here. You know, the two swims we picked, they had fish right in front, so I literally put out 2 hook baits and that was it. No freebies, just got the baits out, put them out in front of me here because the fish were all the way from that island right the way through, so I didn't really need to go any further. No.
Nothing happened. So where have you got your rigs now?
So we've had a bit of change of plan now. So my right hand rod is now along from this silt run. There's a lovely plateau that sort of rides up. It comes up to about 2 foot. So I've got a single fluorescent pop-up right on top of it where these fish have been tracking back and forth.
No free bait at all?
Nothing, just on its own.
I'm
literally going for one fish, one bite, and they're not really in the mood for feeding, so I'm kind of thinking one might come along and just snaffle that up. Whereas the other rod is down on this island on the left by the reeds, and I waded that along with a pair of chest waders, and on that I've got a little stick and then probably 15 small baits scattered around, not tight, sort of in a little spread, and that's sat down there fishing away now, but as yet nothing, mate. No,
yeah, it's a good looking area, definitely. Yeah. Well, Ben is actually quite a rig tactician. He's very into the detail of rigs, and I want to pick some of that stuff up with Ben later on. But for now, Ben, I'm going to leave him to it and see if I can spot a few fish in my swim. Fingers crossed we catch some.
Be lucky, mate.
Right, this is my swim. It's called Brick Point. Ben's just round the corner. I've got 2 rods in here. It's a 2-rod only rule on this fishery. And the first one, my right-hand rod, is fishing up the side of this island. It's a fabulous interception spot. So you've got in this area, you've got a channel beyond me at the end of this island that goes round into some more open water. There's a really little intimate channel that runs in here, just about 5 metres out around this corner, and there's a thoroughfare here that comes through from another bay. So we've got routes for the fish to be coming in and out all the time, so it's a brilliant interception spot. And if you're ever stuck for a choice of swims, a swim like this is a good one to go in. You know, if you go in a little corner and the fish aren't there, you haven't got a chance. But in a swim like this, there's always going to be fish coming through. Although I don't think there's many fish in this area at the moment. I've seen 2 or 3 just in the last couple of minutes cruising through. So my right-hand rod is out by the lilies. There's an overhanging buddleia there, and I'm fishing right under the tip of that buddleia there. And that one I've got boilies. Now this fishery has been fishing really well apparently with boilies in the last month, so I've gone for boilies on that rod, but I don't like to be keeping everything on the same track, so I think it's quite important to chop and change. So boilies on the right hand rod, over about 100 freebies. Kept that real simple, don't try to overcomplicate things. However, a really good tip that I think Ben and I would both advocate is if you are fishing a water like this, try and think a little bit outside the box, and that's what I've done with my left hand rod. And my left-hand rod, I've got in the edge and I've just waded around the corner and I've flicked it down to an overhanging tree. A really, really awkward cast. And it's also a spot that wouldn't regularly be fished. because it's really tricky to get to. Most anglers are going to come in here and probably fish out into that sort of area where I'm fishing with my right hand rod. So I tried to bring the changes with that one. And with that one, I'm just fishing with a couple of grains of plastic corn just on a balanced rig, and I've got that over a bit of hemp and sweet corn. And what I'd like to do now is put a bit of free bait in, and what I'm going to do is show you how I do that. It's not using the conventional method. Okay, so this is my sneaky little bucket trick. I've got an old roach pole. The tip section broke, so it was going to be thrown away, and I went, I'll have that. So I've got my roach pole, got a bit of cord. I've got an old catfish hook, which has had the point taken off, so there's nothing sharp on there, and an old bait bucket and a bit of black cord. And this is how I use it. So the first thing you do is put in a bit of hemp and corn. Now, hemp and corn, great bait, all-time fantastic carp catchers, but if you throw that out underarm, often it spreads out and you end up with quite a big patch of bait in the swim, and sometimes the fish aren't targeting exactly where you've got your hook bait. And in this case, I've got my hook bait absolutely under a little overhanging branch, and I want to bait up bang on top of it. So a bit of hemp and corn goes in there, and the beautiful thing about this little trick is you can put a bit of liquid in there too. So I can pour a bit of lovely, smelly, hempy, sweet corn fluid in there, all that lovely milkiness, which is going to cloud up in the swim. And think of all the smell that's going to come up in that area without actually giving the fish too much food. So I load it up, and when I actually do it, I'm going to put a bit more bait in than I have here. Then you ship it out across the surface. So the trick is to keep that bucket nice and upright. You ship it out across the surface of the pond, keeping the tension on, and obviously adding sections to the pole as you go. Get to the money spot, unhook the catfish hook, and then tip the bucket out. And away goes all that lovely goodness into the swim. Then all you need to do is ship it back across the surface. Job done. Pinpoint bait accuracy. Nailed. It's now searing mid-afternoon heat. Got to be 27, 28 degrees out here. I'm absolutely melting in my swim, which has gone a bit quiet. Anyway, I've reeled in the rods, had a little bit of a creep around, and it's clear there's a lot of fish up this end of the lake, so the other end from where Ben and I have been fishing. Whether it's our pressure, the angling pressure that's moved them, or the atmospheric conditions today. The wind's slightly different today, maybe they've moved on that. Anyway, there's a lot of fish up here, and not being one to want to sit on my hands and wait for them to come to me, I'm chasing after them relentlessly. Chase, chase, chase. And occasionally catch. Anyway, so what I've done, I've flicked out a little sweet corn trap on a shallow mark just off a patch of lilies, which looks pretty good. There's a little bit of colour in the water earlier on, so I think the odd fish might have had a pick up there, whether it's some bait left over from the weekend. And on the other rod, I'm going to fish a standard zig rig setup. So what I've got is a little cork dust pop-up on a size 10 mixer style hook, and then I've tied that to a 6-foot hook link. I'm guessing the depth. I've netted here in the past, and I think it's about 6 to 7 foot, so I'm aiming for 6 foot. I'll flick it out, and if the pop-up's clearly visible on the top, I'll just gently reel it in and shave a little bit off the hook link to reduce it. So we've got the 6-foot hook link, and at the other end here, I've got a little fixed lead, which is just held on with a tail rubber. And I flick that out, and hopefully then when the fish takes, that'll just pop off nice and quick and get out of the way so I can play the fish on the long hook link. Anyway, that's enough chit chat from me. I want to get this in the water and see if we can't catch one of these digger hand fish. How's it going, Ben?
It's pretty tense.
I was walking round, see having a couple of casts and a big old pair of lips come up. This is about as exciting as it gets. I'm one of the world's worst floater fishermen, and Ben is brilliant.
Not today, mate. Not today at all.
How many fish have you got?
Well, I don't know. There's a fair group, but I think because they're not used to float, they've got no floater history on this place, and I think they're almost a little bit clumsy. So I've had a couple of really good chances, but I actually don't. One definitely took it and I missed it, but one, it looked like it had taken it, but it was very clumsy.
Fish seem very lethargic in the main lake at the moment. And they're just
Acorns.
literally drifting. It's a big fish, isn't it?
It's a good fish. But yeah, I think, you know, as I was saying, I think that, you know, they just...
in the drift.
Yeah. I'm going to have to recast it.
One of the tricks with floater fishing, which Ben is very good at, is mending the presentation. So you can't have that floater drifting across the surface at a pace that doesn't match the drift of the debris on the surface of the lake, because if it does, it's very obvious to the fish that it's not a freebie. So what Ben has to do, and you'll see when he casts out, he's then correcting the line and trying to get a nice direct line onto that floater without a big bow in the line. And that means that any drift in the surface is matched by his hook bait. It's really important. Go on, you've got to catch one.
I'm getting there.
Pressure, pressure.
There's a really good group of fish which are just down there,
Yeah.
and that's the main group. But unfortunately, we've got a fish right where I need to cast.
Oh, look, look, look. Oh. He definitely took something then, didn't he? I've got a group coming in from the right. Just goes to show, even on the hottest day of the year, if you persist, there are opportunities to be had.
Just going to wait, just let these guys sort of sort themselves out and get on another pass, because you can then sort of ambush them, because I haven't got a controller on because it's so close, you know.
Yeah, definitely the odd ones
it's
picking
an
them up.
opportunity.
Ben, tell us for the benefit of the viewers, why have you not put a controller on there?
At the moment, they've been so close. It's just the disturbance. I mean,
Right.
ideally now I could probably do with one just to get that extra distance.
So the controller's job really is to give you the
Yeah, the
extra distance
distance,
out
yeah,
in the
but-
cast.
Yeah, it's because they're taking it. By the time I now, you know, might make the adjustment, my chance might be over. The chances today have been very limited
Fleeting.
timelines.
Well, they're really not feeding hard, are they? They're just picking odd baits.
No,
It's not exactly brilliant feeding conditions. And, you know, if you had a bit more ripple, perhaps they'd be up for it. But it's great to see a few fish actually taking something. It gives you a bit of confidence to keep going at them, doesn't it?
It can't get much worse, can it?
Nice fish just come through. You probably hear in the distance, it's about 5:30, rush hour on the M5. It's actually a couple of 100 metres away, it's quite a way off, but there's a little breeze coming this way and you can hear the cars going past. I just think, even though we're out here cooking, desperately trying to catch a fish for you, there's some poor chaps out there on the motorway struggling on their way home.
Cracking common.
Lovely common down here. Beautiful fish. You can see the old plate scaling on his back. Lovely fish. Don't think there's that many commons in here, but there are some absolute crackers. When I've been down here netting in the winter, we've caught a few, and they're upper 20s. They're really mint-looking fish, really handsome carp. Certainly if Ben catches one of those on his floater set up, he's going to have a proper runabout. That has been a hard day. It's been hot work. It's not quite done yet. Unfortunately for Ben and I, most of the fish are clearly up the other end of the lake now. There's definitely one or two stragglers down here, but it is just out. I've seen 2 or 3 in this bay this afternoon. Yesterday afternoon, maybe 50 or 60 fish. So it's clear there's been a big shift up the lake. The wind has definitely moved slightly, so things are changing. One of the lessons I've learned in my carp fishing is if you're going to fish little lakes like this and you haven't got weeks and weeks to sit in a good swim, then it's worth being really active and proactive and chasing those fish down. And so we're going to move and reset our camp up the other end. It's been a really good day. Ben's obviously had a couple of very, very close calls off the top on a lake that doesn't have much form for floater fishing, so that bodes well. And I think probably tomorrow and possibly the day after we'll be fine-tuning our floater fishing opportunities and hopefully getting one. But yeah, for now, over and out. We'll give you an update in the morning. Well, here we go. I finally caught one after all the heat and intensity of yesterday. Woke up at 4 o'clock this morning, beautiful breeze blowing down the lake, temperatures dropped by about 15 degrees, much better fishing conditions. I'm looking out across the lake, a fish head and shouldered, then I had a little liner on my close range spot, and then an absolute flyer on that rod. Just fishing across the bay to a little island margin, a little sweet corn trap. It rattled off, fish powered up the margins of the island. I was thinking, hanging on for dear life, thinking, crikey, can't lose this one, chance, game on. Anyway, plodded up and down, and eventually I slipped this one in the net. Really pleased to catch this fish. Obviously, difficult conditions, and you're obviously worried about getting a fish for the show. Anyway, here we go, we're off the mark, up and running. I'll show you the rig I was using in a minute. I know Ben's up in the bay, where he's seen a lot of fish yesterday on the top. I don't know how he's got on, but I think it's time probably to get this fish back in the water. Certainly there's a lot of other fish in the area. See if we can't winkle out another one.
Good morning. Well, as of yet, no fish for me. I know Simon's had one, so the pressure's really on this end. Moved last night, a lot of fish in this area. I put this left-hand rod down the bank there where there was a lot of action, a lot of fizzing coming up. So I've got that one there. Nothing happened last night, but I've adjusted it. And what I've put out is a stick and about 20 little tiny baits just broken up and scattered along a lovely silty run. It's about 3 foot deep. I haven't fiddled around too much down there. No plumbing, no thrashing the water to a foam. Just want to keep that one fishing away nice and quietly. The other one, a little bit different. Just out here, about 30 yards, I know there's this hump that comes up. It comes up to about 2 foot from underneath the surface. So what I've done, I've put a high visibility tipped hook bait on there with about ½ kilo of bait on there. I put that out last night, and I've just put a fresh hook bait out this morning. I'm kind of thinking that when the fish comes back and forward from the other side through the other lake into what is this area called Tyler's Bay, I'm hoping it'll ambush them, we'll get a bit of action going on there, and they'll start feeding. We've seen some fizzing on there this morning, so things are looking good. Unlike me now, I'm going to have to sit on my hands a bit. Usually I like to be around the lake trying to sort of force action and try and get a take, but I'm just going to have to sit here and wait. So hopefully within the next couple of hours I should see something happen.
Sweet corn, one of the absolute all-time favourite carp baits, and I love this stuff, and so do the fish. There's actually 21 grains here, which is significant for me. I'm a superstitious angler, and 7 is my lucky number. So when I'm baiting up, I like to bait up in multiples of 7. So it'd be 7 boilies, 14 boilies, 21 boilies. The same applies to sweet corn. And this little trap, which is 21 grains of corn, caught me my biggest UK carp, Mary, out of Raisbury at over 50 pounds. It's a huge fish to eat such a tiny little plate of food. Anyway, the reason I'm using sweet corn here is because I think at times of the year, particularly when it's really hot, the carp prefer to eat this sort of food to maybe a complicated fish meal boilie. And as the results proved last night, I was using boilies on one rod and sweet corn on the other, and it was a sweet corn rod that went, and they were both fishing in really tidy little spots. But the only feeding activity I got in my swim was over the top of the corn, and as I said, I've had a bite on it. And I actually put a little bit more in than this to the margin that I'm fishing to, but you know, it's a good little trap. Anyway, sweet corn's a great bait to use, but sometimes it can be difficult to fish over. So let's have a little look at the rig that I'm using to fish over this patch of corn. And here it is. This is the rig that I'm using. Very simple, but really effective, and I've used it for a number of years to great effect. Now what we've got here is a supple braid. It's got no coating on it. I prefer a supple braid like this. It's super heavy, it sinks to the bottom really well, and with the 2 pieces of plastic corm, which are slow sinking, it balances lovely, it sits on the bottom, makes a really aggressive little trap on a short hook link. So what we've got here is a loop at the top end, which I clip onto my lead clip, a short section of braid, maybe 5-6 inches, depending on the bottom of the lake. If it's a bit grubby, I'll put a bit longer. It's nice and short where I'm fishing here. You know, something like that's perfect. I've got a tiny little bit of shrink tube just to kick round on the eye to make the hooking arrangement more aggressive. I've got a size 8 wide gate patterned hook, which I think is a good compromise with the 2 pieces of plastic slow sinking corm. You could use a size 10 if you're fishing in a really clear swim, but there's a few lilies down to my right and a bit of a snaggy tree to my left, so I want a slightly bigger hook, but balanced up perfectly with these 2 grains of slow sinking plastic. That will flutter down onto the lake bed and should sit something like that. So the hook is actually in a prone position, so if a fish sucks it up, and starts to move, that hook is already dragging across its bottom lip and hoping to take a hold. So here it is. This is the little sweet corn rig that's been so effective in this session for me. If you use it in your fishing, I reckon you'll catch with it. Let's hope it catches me another fish or two this session. What I'd like to do now is dissect some of the swims around the fishery. This is a very intimate, small water, and I want to look at some of the swims and some of the features that you might want to fish to on a trip to a venue like this. On the right-hand side of the swim, we've got a big channel running away. I say big, it's only about 10 metres wide, but then it opens up to a second island, a much bigger island in the distance, which has got a weeping willow on it, and that's the island margin that I've been fishing to earlier in the trip. Going off to the right then, that channel runs right round that big island, comes through here, it breaks up, and you've got a small dot island in front of us here, and that's got like a skirt of burreed all the way around it, and that's the sort of feature. Those fish are going to be feeding right tight to those stems. Dropping off the island, you've got a lovely patch of white lilies flowering at the moment. Don't they look pretty? Come round, you've got a lovely little bit of fringe lily. They're all real carpy spots. Now I think on this right hand side, you've got two rod options here. You could fish one maybe on the edge of the island, right on the end of that island, one in maybe on the fringe there on the burr reed, but you've also mustn't forget the margins down here, probably a spot that's overlooked. Remember, you've only got two rods at this fishery. If you're sat in the swim, lots of options. Most people would probably overlook that. Over on the far side, it's about 25 to 30 yards away from here, you've got some overhanging trees. There is a swim over there, but it's facing between the two islands, so you're pretty safe up to the edge of that swim. You've got some nice big overhanging willows and some fringe lily. On the far left-hand side of swim one, we've got a lovely little channel. It narrows right up and wraps around into another bay under a bridge. Really carpy looking spot. This would actually take you around into the bay that Ben's fishing. So we know the carp are coming out the main body of the lake, which is about 4 acres all wrapped around these islands. They're coming this way and they're going to funnel right up through this channel. So don't ignore putting maybe a single pop-up just in the channel. Obviously this left-hand margin is really tasty. There's no swims from here right the way round for about 45, 50 yards. On the far side, we've got that cracking great ash tree overhanging. Lovely spot for the fish to sit up. Got this floating scum that's been funneled in with the wind. Certainly a nice attractive sight for carp. They like to sit up under that. On the far side, fringe lilies and overhanging margins. So all really good spots to fish to. So I reckon you could probably fish 20 rods in here. On the day you're here, you're only going to have 2 rods to play with. So I'd be tempted to probably fish one on the far side and one in a bit closer and mix it up. But certainly keep your eyes open and maybe trickle a bit of bait in 1 or 2 other spots. Keep them primed and see if you get any feeding activity. It's quite a shallow lake. And what we have noticed in the last couple of days is you get mud plumes coming up where the fish are feeding. So be looking for those all the time. Okay, so this is quite an intimate little swim. Let's go and have a look at a slightly bigger swim that's a bit more open. Okay, this swim is a bit of a contrast to swim number 1. This is called the Big Junction, and it's a junction for sure. There are 4 islands in front of us, a little one to the right, big island straight in front, but it's less than 50 yards away, and then a couple of smaller islands. There's fish in here today cruising about. It's quite a shallow area, but this area of the lake holds fish all the time. I netted this in the winter with students on a couple of occasions, and we've shot the net round in this bay, and we've never failed to catch fish here. 2 years running I've netted it, and 2 years running we've caught a lot of fish in this swim, so definitely worth a go. My opinion in here is to fish one quite short, maybe one of these gullies, and one a bit further out to the sides of that big island. Well worth a go. Anyway, let's go and look at another smaller spot. Okay, from the biggest and the most popular swim on the lake to the smallest and most frequently overlooked. Now, I'm not suggesting if you've got 3 days and 3 nights ahead of you, you'd want to bivvy up in here, but for short session fishing and for ambushing a carp, this is an absolute hotspot. You've got a narrow channel that runs through. It's literally 8-9 metres wide. It's running down through here and it's connecting up 2 areas of the lake. The carp will be passing through this all the time. Well worth a few grains of corn, a few chopped boilies maybe on that far margin. Bait it, walk round, have a little look, see if you see any plumes of mud coming up, drop a rig in, and fingers crossed you should get one. I hope that's been an interesting insight to an intimate water like this. We've had a few options, islands, channels, good looking margins. Certainly be prepared to have a go in different swims on a lake like this, and whatever you do, if you're fishing a swim like this, you must make sure that you're very, very quiet.
managed to stalk this one. Just saw some fish dusting up in the channel and managed to get a rig amongst them. And yeah, away it went.
Oh God, Ben, well done. You have been persevering big time.
It's a little double by the looks of it.
Oh, well done, mate. Where'd you get it from?
Just down here off the island. Just saw them dusting up a couple of times. Managed to get a rig down there.
Oh, well done. God, you've persevered. Superb. What was the bait? It was my
golden grains.
You caught it on my sweet corn.
I went and pinched them out your swim while you were doing some filming.
You thieving. Should we move up this next little bit here? This is really quite awkward along here, isn't it? Oh, well done. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we've had no bites on the boilies at all. And we've both fished with corn on a rod. You've had one now, I've had one.
Have driven me round the twist today as well.
Oh, you've been persevering like mad, haven't you? I was so impressed. I would have given up and gone to bed, I think. No, fantastic. Oh! My God!
That's a bit unsporting.
Oh my God! That really did jump out of the landing nets. I've never.
You don't realise how important this fish is.
I've never seen one do that. It truly jumped out of the net. Oh, if I'd been trying to knock it off, man, I'd been much more thorough than that. Oh my word. Oh, well done for persevering. That just goes to show, Ben, that if you keep going, Adam. You've been trying like mad with those floaters. He's a really feisty male fish, I guess, isn't he?
Yes!
Yes, well done. Oh my word.
Brilliant.
Well, that just goes to show, guys, if you're up against it, you've just got to keep trying. Ben has been busting a gut to get a bite.
Oh.
Fantastic.
I just didn't think we was ever going to catch one. It's just been such hard work.
I thought your luck had run out.
Yeah, it's just been continuous hard work on your feet. Keep going, and as you can see, hard work pays off in the end.
Well done, Ben. That's fantastic. After all that perseverance, you finally got one, and to stalk it out as well.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, just saw some fish up there, dusting up. Just got a bait in amongst them.
Brilliant. I know you were feeling a lot of pressure. Obviously, I had the fish this morning, and that puts the pressure back on you a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, doubly so. I'm really feeling it today, and it's been really tough conditions. So no, super chuffed to get this one.
First time to be on thinking tackle and not to catch you.
On my own fishery.
On your own lake. Now, Ben, what's interesting for you and I, obviously, is you've done a bit of fishery management and fish farming, and I'm a carp farmer when I'm not out doing this sort of thing. This fish is clearly a male. He's got spawning tubercles on his gill plates and also down the leading edge of his pectoral fins, and that's a really good indicator that he's a male fish. And the sort of size he is as well is also a pretty good sign that he's one of the boys in the pond, and he will have been busy spawning maybe a week or 10 days ago. And it's not uncommon at this time of the year that the males will stop for a little snack. They're feeling quite revved up, but also they will have a little feed along the way. So yeah, we're pleased to get him, obviously. The other thing that's really interesting is the bait. We've both been fishing boilies.
Yeah.
This lake's been fishing well on boilies recently, but the weather's been really hot, as you've seen. And I caught the fish this morning on sweet corn, and clearly Ben's been borrowing some of my sweet corn.
I snaffled a couple of grains off you, and away you go.
What about rig? What did you catch it on?
Just a very straightforward little rig, knotless knot, nothing too technical.
Braid?
Literally a braid rig with a pinch of corn around it, and
Right.
that was it.
Okay, so a little sweet corn.
They're not
trap.
eating a lot at the moment, so.
Good stuff. Well, Ben, I reckon we should get this one back. Is he okay? Well helped,
Yeah.
sir. Get this one back in the pond, and then see if
Get
we can catch another one.
Excellent.
Small water carp fishing can be very explosive, and that's what I love about it. But that can also mean that you get very, very vigorous takes. And one bit of kit that I would suggest we use whenever we're fishing on lakes like this, particularly if you're fishing down the bank, either left or right to an overhanging tree or a snaggy margin, is these snag ears. Now, the idea of these is to prevent the rod being ripped off the rest. So you imagine we get a really vigorous take, and if this rod was fishing hard down to my left, the pull on the rod tip would be hard round, and that could result in that rod bouncing off the rests. So the snag ears prevent that happening. They're attached below the buzzer, they screw into place and they hold that rod really secure. I have mine on the buzzers all the time, so they're just a permanent fixture. So wherever I'm fishing, I don't have to worry about it. I know if I end up fishing down a margin, I've got the snag ears in place. The other little thing that I always do is make sure that I use a secure butt grip. So when I place my rod on the rests, I always push it down into the butt grip, make sure it's engaged, so it's holding the rod nice and tight. There's lots of different models on the market. These are the ones I've been using for many years and I've got a lot of confidence in. That's holding that rod butt nice and secure. And then the other thing I do, and this harps back to a time when I used to have long hair and occasionally wear a ponytail, believe it or not, is to use a hairband. And what I like to always do is just stick a hairband over the bottom of the rod like that. So if that ever popped up out that rest, that's always going to be holding that tight. I can't go any further than that, and that's going to give me an opportunity to get hold of that rod butt. So really important, and something I would certainly put a lot of emphasis on. So a couple of things there on rod security and also making sure that you don't miss an opportunity. Another little tip that I'm a big fan of when it comes to fishing on small waters like this is these fellas, back leads. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, these were really in vogue. They were used all the time. Nowadays, people prefer to fish slack lines. I'm not always a big fan of slack line fishing. I think sometimes the fish get away with it. They come in, they pick up your rig, quick shake of the head, and they're gone. You might get a bleep, but that's about it. You certainly don't get a flyer. I think these guys can sometimes help you convert more fish picking up your rig into runs. Okay, so these are back leads, as I say. This one here is a homemade version, just a little lead and a clip, which has got a cut out of it so I can slide it on the line. Now the idea of a back lead is you slide it on the main line down onto the bottom of the lead. So from your rod tip, the line's going down to the lake bed and then it runs along to your rig. So of course the idea is that all of your line is then pinned to the bottom of the lake. It works beautifully in silty lakes and certainly where you've not got too many contours. If you've got big gravel bars and weed beds, then don't use back leads. But certainly in a lake like this, which is relatively flat on the bottom, and I'm fishing across to a margin of an island, these are brilliant bits of kit. So they pin that line down, and any fish that are coming through on this channel then, they're not going to bump into my main line, and that's not going to spook them. You clip your main line under this little hook here, as you can see. You then push the plastic down into the rubber grommet. That holds it secure, and then that slides off down the line, and you just lift your rod tip up to guide it down your main line like a little man on a zip wire into position. Let it settle on the lake bed and then set your bobbins as you want them as normal. I like to have them on a bit of a drop. The brilliant thing about these commercially available back leads is this. If during the fight the fish does pick up a bit of weed or a snaggy branch, these little fellas pop off. And the idea is then that you've got a free line and this little grommet will run off down towards the fish and you leave the lead in the lake out of harm's way. So there you go. 3 little tips that I would always look to be using on a lake like this. Give them a go. I mentioned earlier in the show that Ben is actually something of a rig tactician. Now the fish that he's just caught was caught on a very small lead. This, by contrast, is an absolute housebreak. Ben, tell us about this setup.
That is a 5-ounce flatline pair.
Just a 5-ounce lead. How far would you cast that?
Just 5 ounce, not very far at all. Generally it's for dropping in the edge or placing by hand.
Okay, so when would you employ this setup?
I would employ that setup when we've got a spot going in the edge where I can see what's going on, when the fish have maybe either moved off or I'm expecting them to come in the evening, and I'd be able to get that positioned perfectly.
So it's all about setting a big trap rather than getting it in when the fish are on the spot.
Yeah, like earlier the fish were coming in and out, in and out. I waited, had a 1-ounce lead, obviously the little grains of corn, and I just swung it out when the fish had gone in, trap set, back out the way. If you were to swing that one in, that would be the last you saw of the fish. That's right. 5 ounces, it just makes hell of a splash. Okay,
so this is to set up before the fish are on the spot. And what's going on here? I see that it's not attached to the end of the lead.
No, it's halfway. It's to really just to get the centre of gravity spot on, so you're getting the maximum hit from the lead. You've got a little ring with a clip on it that's attached to the loop on the end of the rig. So that just sits between 2 beads, and you just position those beads so they're right in the middle of the lead.
Okay, and what's the advantage of that?
You just get that full weight.
So as the fish moves, it gets bonk, and it gets the whole weight of the lead. So that's going to hopefully make them spook. You're more likely to convert bites.
Turn that hook, get it in straight away.
Good stuff. Okay, there's something else that's quite clever here. It's not all just about the hook link coming off the centre of gravity. There's something else that happens here.
Yeah, you and I, when we used to fish up at Raysbury, because you're using boats all the time, you had to use very big leads because of the undertow in the water. You know, you've got 120 acres of water, 18 foot deep, huge undertow. We were using anything up to 8 ounces of lead.
Yeah, they were bigger than this one.
They were. The last thing you want is to hook a fish and have that trailing around behind. So what you did, we came up with this idea, and I sort of thought it through, and this enables the lead on the take to drop off, so you lose the lead straight away.
Okay, so show us how that works.
So once the fish picks up the hook bait, hooks itself, hopefully, it just all falls apart.
Okay, gone, lead out the way.
As simple as that. You're then in contact with the fish, no lead to get caught up in the weed,
okay.
and away you go.
It just slides down on that bead.
Yeah, and
here.
comes up against the swivel.
Okay, that's very interesting. Well, the other thing I'd like just to quickly pick your brains about is the actual setup itself, the hooking arrangement, because this looks a little bit unusual as well.
Yeah, it comes from the sort of thinking that you want a bit of a stiffer section near the hook to make the hook turn. So you're using what was has been named now the Johnny Mac rig.
Right.
But all I've done, rather than putting a loop on the back, I've pulled the loop down tight against the eye, and that gives a nice straight boom section for about 2 inches before you go into your hook link.
Yeah, you can see that. It's a bit stiff there.
And that just
And
just
then the
makes
attachment of the hair.
Yeah, right off the end there. You can do the hand trick with that one, and it just spins around every time. It's like the claw rig.
Yeah.
But it's
perfect.
the good thing about this is if I'm stalking and the hook goes blunt, I quickly can unloop the hook, put a fresh one all set up with baits on, and I'm stalking again.
And away you go.
Yeah, because my time for fishing now is so limited. I do very few.
And one last question: would you always use this rig with that lead setup?
No.
No, so it's not exclusive.
No, that lead setup, I've used it with very short hook lengths, half and less the length of that one. But the good thing about the clip, you can just clip it on and away you go.
Okay, well that's a really fascinating insight into a rig that is clearly going to do a lot of damage on a small venue like this, where you've got wary carp that might be feeding very gingerly on spots around the edge. Give it a go. Well, we're coming into the last evening of the trip. Feels fantastic this evening, really carpy atmosphere. The temperature's come down a few degrees. We haven't got that searing heat of yesterday. The lake looks beautiful, really serene in the evening light. Reed warblers moving up and down on the far margin of that island. It looks and sounds lovely. Got the traps set, right hand rod, same setup that produced the fish last night. I've got corn on that one again, so I've not changed anything. Left hand rod I have changed a bit, because the corn is obviously doing the goods. And the boilies haven't been producing any bites. I've got corn on that one, slightly longer hook link, and I put a bit of bait out over the top of it, just a few handfuls of corn and a few grains of hemp mixed with it, so that's out there. Ben's laying in wait up in the bay, so fingers crossed for a successful and productive last night.
To say I'm frustrated is an understatement. I've tried pretty much everything in here. Last night was another quiet night. I've seen fish moving. There's been a few fish moving out over the hump I've got bait on, but really it's very quiet. This fishery usually fishes very well. If we were putting in this sort of work rate, we would be catching many fish. As I've said earlier, I've tried most things. The methods I'm using at the moment would usually catch numbers of fish, especially over this time period. There's been fish grouped up. It looks like they're sort of not quite over their spawning phase, which they went through last week. There's males chasing some of the females. And having walked this fishery most days through the week, it is incredibly quiet, which adds to the frustration. So if nothing happens within the next hour and a half, what we'll have to do is wind in and sort of take the fight to the fish, really.
Well, here we go, last chance saloon. We're right at the western end of the lake, nearest the M5, which you can probably hear in the distance. Ben and I have reeled in our main rods now, tidied up our swims, and come for a little walk round to see if we can make a chance happen. And we found a little group of fish feeding just in the edge here. It's coloured up, the weather's changing, it's deteriorating quite quickly now. And so we're going for something, hopefully to nick a quick bite, little red maggots. Carp absolutely love them, all coarse fish love them, perch, rudd, roach, you name it, they all eat maggots, but carp love them, and this is a great setup. So it's a really simple setup. I've got just a basic lead clip, a bit of hook link material, I've got a little plastic maggot on there and a few maggots on the hook, and that's nicked into this bag of maggots. So that should hopefully settle on the bottom of the lake like that and be a really tasty mouthful for a carp that's grubbing about down there. Anyway, we've only got about an hour of the shoot left, so fingers crossed we can nick a last fish before we call it a day. Time to get this one in the water quick. We've got about an hour left, but there's bubbles coming up on the spot we've seen the fish. We've got our rigs in. This is real heart-stopping stuff. I've got my pulse racing. We were sat there behind static rods, not very much happening. There's one there, look. Oh my God, come on. Nothing's happened yet, but obviously we've been sat behind static rods, had a little walk, reeled in, had a walk round, and we've got ourselves a chance now. We've got an hour, as I say, and fingers crossed, this is really tense stuff.
Still on there, Ben?
Yeah, it's still on. It's gone around these pads.
Oh my God, that's exciting. The rod just kicked suddenly and off it went.
Just keeping very steady pressure on. Here it comes. Here it comes.
Well done, fella. And that was the rod you
Just re-chucked it, fresh bag on, just out by the pads.
Fantastic. Let me get the landing net.
Oh no!
Oh.
Oh. What have we got to do? What have we got to do to put a fish on the bank?
I don't believe it. Guys, we have just sat through an absolute torrential downpour. What a U-turn in the weather. 2 hours ago we were sweating, boiling hot, and then it went grey and it has poured down. Got a couple of bags of maggots out, been sat here for an hour, and we're both soaked through. Ben's rod rips off and the hook's pulled. We've tried our very, very best.
That's fishing, mate.
Yeah. And come here. Oh, well done despite the loss, Ben. You've been a brilliant guest. Hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been fantastic.
It's been a really interesting and difficult session, hasn't it? Quite challenging.
Definitely, yeah.
We've moved about a lot, chopped and changed. Obviously we started, you were on boilies.
Yeah.
I was on boilies and corn, and I had that fish, that beautiful mirror on the corn on my second night. Lovely fish for about 15, 16 pounds. I'm really pleased to get that one. Then obviously you helped yourself to a few of the golden grains.
Found a few fish feeding in that little channel, and there was just that small opportunity. Got some corn out amongst them, had a bite within, well, not a long time at all, so it was good.
It was a nice fish, and we saw obviously he had a lot of spawning tubercles on his cheeks, didn't he?
Yeah, I think some have spawned, some haven't, and they're still sort of thinking about it with the weather.
The weather's obviously it's been hot, they've been right up in the water. We've seen a lot of fish following each other. You said about fish pushing each other along a bit, so maybe they're still feeling a little bit spawny.
Yeah.
Anyway, the weather's much better for a bite now, but unfortunately our time has run out. We have to call it a day. For more tackle, tactics and tips, go to thinkingtackle.co.uk, and if you're not sat at home watching Thinking Tackle, you should be out here in the pouring rain fishing with Ben and I. Enjoy it.